Welcome to Joint Session Diverse Voices in New York State Cannabis, the podcast where policymakers, legislators, thought leaders, licensees, and advocates come to discuss the evolving landscape of cannabis in New York and beyond. I'm Herb Barbot, former Director of Operations at New York's Office of Cannabis Management. Each episode, we bring you in-depth conversations with key voices shaping policy, business, and advocacy, plus expert insights on the latest developments impacting the industry. And now for the episode. Welcome to episode 15 of season 2 of Joint Session. This is Herb Barbot, and in this episode, we'll have a panel discussion on branding and marketing with 3 cannabis entrepreneurs who are breaking out of the pack in New York. First is Cristina Lopez, founder and CEO of House of Puff. Next is Alice Bianco, founder and CEO of Pinks. And finally, Wyatt Harms, CEO of Flamer. I've also invited Velvet Kavanaugh out of the cannabis-rich Kootenay region in British Columbia, Canada, to be my co-host this episode. Given the length of this discussion, we are skipping the news this week and going right into the show. Please enjoy. Today, we're going to try something new, a panel discussion with the founders of 3 distinct New York cannabis brands. First, Cristina Lopez, House of Puff, Wyatt Harms, Flamer, and Alice Bianco, Pinks. I have also invited a co-host, Velvet Kavanaugh, joining us from the Kootenay region in British Columbia, Canada. So welcome all, fingers crossed. Velvet, you want to tell us a little bit about yourself before we get started?
Sure, Herb. Thank you. My name is Velvet Kavanaugh. I have a company called Phenologic based in British Columbia, Canada. I work with craft cannabis company leaders to help them run more effective companies, particularly around helping them develop their story, their brand, their marketing, their leadership, all of that piece together. So I'm excited to connect with our guests today and learn more about what they're doing.
All right. And again, thank you for agreeing to co-host this with me. All right. So I'll just kick it off with the first question. We'll begin with Cristina, Ali, and then Wyatt. Can each of you share the origin story behind your brand name and how it reflects your company's core values and target audience? Cristina.
Thank you so much for having me. So I am the founder and CEO of House of Puff. We are a Latina-led, art-forward based cannabis brand here in New York. And we believe that cannabis should feel as elevated as the rest of your lifestyle. So we create beautifully designed products from our THC spritz, pre-rolls, and luxury accessories that we work with artists to create that really break down the stigma and invite more people into the conversation. So, we believe we're not just selling products. We really want to shift the culture through art, education, and accessibility. And House of Puff, the name, is an ode to, haute couture, the house of Chanel, the house of Givenchy, sort of limited edition, really artisanal artworks and craftsmanship.
That's perfect. Thank you. Ali.
So I want to kind of bounce off of what Cristina was saying, because first of all, I love your brand. I love that you guys care about a luxury style cannabis, because that's exactly what we here at Pink stand for, is just kind of removing the stigma and glamorizing cannabis and making it a beautiful girly pop vibe in a way. And also Pinks is for everyone too. Like I always say, real men smoke pinks. It's a vibe. And I think that mindset that cannabis is bad, or that it was bad for you and makes you lazy, I think that's going extinct, because it's just so untrue. I mean, look at all of us here today. We're all entrepreneurs. We're all hardworking, and we all have partaken in cannabis. And I'm a proud partaker myself, and I love it. I love Pinks. I love what I created, and I love to be able to share it with the world. I love making rose petal pre-rolls, because I know it's not easy to make, and I know not everybody can produce it, but my team works hard. So I'm so grateful for people at Big Yield Growers, Andy, and, I'm grateful for everybody involved with Pinks, Leafly, and my marketing team, my PR team, Kaylee, Kim, I got a great team behind me, and I'm very grateful for that. So that's Pinks. That's where we come from. We come from Canna Couture. We come from luxury. We come from, that mindset's going extinct, baby.
All right. Well, thank you. Wyatt.
Hello, everyone. My name is Wyatt Harms, and I am the co-founder and CEO of Flamer. We are a New York-based and New York-only cannabis brand operating in the legal market, and we sell our iconic red pre-rolls, whole flower, and we have some new products coming up as well. You'll have to stay tuned to find out. But yeah, so our name actually, I Googled gay slurs and Flamer came up. And I was like, perfect, that's us. So Flamer is really an extension of our community. Me and my co-founders, we come out of the queer activism space here in New York. We come out of nightlife, we come out of fashion, really just like tying in the creative subcultures that make New York City like New York City. And that gives it its cultural relevancy. And so what we're really doing is we are pulling together all these different creative currents that our city produces, and we're infusing it into what Flamer is. So that's from our nightlife events to our big picnics in Prospect Parks. That's from our product packaging. That's from our collaborations with artists. That's from like the media that we put out into the world, the people that we choose to platform, the artists we choose to partner with. And so it's all about infusing what cannabis could be from a New York perspective. We're founded here in Bushwick in Brooklyn. That's where our headquarters are. And so when you look at the brand and when you experience the brand, it's very it feels like New York, and that's really what we wanted to put into this product, because I think, for a while cannabis has been, more like West Coast, right? Like, obviously New Yorkers smoke the most weed in the world, but like a lot of the brands, just given the timeline of legalization, have been more of this like sunshine and like vibes, whatever that word means. But like, I think what we wanted to do is for New York specifically, was create something that like felt like New York. We were one of the first 15 brands in the market here. And so we knew that New York had this opportunity with legal cannabis to create something fresh, to create something new, to create something that had national potential. But to create something that was actually New York. And so that's what Flamer is. It's an extension of our culture and putting that into cannabis.
All right. And I did visit your office, and you can't get more New York than being under the subway tracks. I know
we might hear the subway passing. I'll pant but we love our subway. Actually, the initial Flamer logo is like the wet paint sign from the subway, like torn up and rearranged. So she's the lifeblood of our city, All
right, Velvet.
It's really great to have this conversation with you around branding, because you all have such distinctive branding. And so what I'm getting from you, Christina, is this luxury high fashion. Allie, I'm getting this fun girly pop vibe, and Wyatt, this queer community activism energy. And your brands are really identity driven, which is more about connecting with consumers about who it is that they want to become and how it is that they want to feel. So you've already touched on the story that people are buying into when they buy your products. I'm wondering, getting more into the nitty gritty about what's the everyday problem that you are helping people solve. That's really what, in the end of the day, drives people to buy from you, is they have a problem, they have a desire, they want you to fix that for them and solve that problem. So Christina, will you tell me a bit more about what does it come down to? What's the everyday problem that you're helping people solve?
I think first and foremost, it is, this sort of the stigma, right? And I think, for us, we try not to, like a lot of our products, yes, they are for cannabis use, especially our THC and our D9 products. But our accessories, which we started with, a lot of my friends don't consume cannabis, and they have our barrel bowls and they put salt and pepper in them. So we really just want to show consumers, especially because there is such a stigma still, especially around women and women of color, that this can easily integrate into your life. And I think trust is a big thing, especially in a space like cannabis. There's so much stigma. There's so much misinformation. So a strong brand can really create a sense of safety and credibility, which, we not only do through our product, but we have a huge education, all of our social media channels, a huge following on YouTube, where we really break it down for consumers and customers to feel at ease with what they are putting into their bodies and what they're using.
Great. How about you, Wyatt?
I feel like so for us, like in terms of problems that we're solving, I don't actually see it necessarily as a problem. It's more of actually creating space for community. So like the way that I've experienced cannabis, it's like passing a joint around, in a circle of friends. That's how I was introduced to the plant. And so it's really about infusing that kind of sense of connection that the plant brings, to everything that we're doing, and giving people a opportunity to see themselves in what we're creating and to feel a part of this overall like mission. And I think cannabis has, as a plant, like such a natural, like regenerative, effect on people. It opens people up. It opens people's minds. It's a plant that has so many health benefits. It's a plant that has so much, public health potential, especially as an alternative to alcohol. And so what we want to do with Flamer is to start creating those spaces around the plant so that people can come and connect, and they can find community, and they can feel like they're part of something larger than just themselves. I think we've, in this society, so isolated ourselves into, individual experiences, into online interactions. And so Flamer is really about breaking some of that down and to provide that space. And then the other thing is like, we do want to make cannabis accessible for people, whether it's like making it easier to buy, whether it's also making it easier to understand like the effects of cannabis. I think a lot of times people in cannabis, they have this perspective that folks are like them, in terms of their consumption habits. And that's not actually the case. Most people who are consuming cannabis aren't in the weeds, thinking about all the different science that goes into this plant. And, there's one strategy to educate and to bring people along on that journey. And that's absolutely something that I want Flamer to do. But for me, it's really actually about like creating that intrigue so people can explore further, but making it really simple at the jump of just understanding like what to expect, so it's like the way that we name our strains, it's like silly goofy, lobotomy, it's like things that it's like, okay, I have a sense of what this will do, and each individual's like interaction with the plant is going to be different, but like at least I kind of have this like this quick like indicator of the experience. And so I think that's really important for us as we grow and as we start to reach more and more consumers and bring in people to cannabis. It's like creating that pathway to quickly understand like the experience, but then also it's like there is that like taking them on the journey and like bringing them into like what Flamer is, and then doing more education and doing more like community connection. But I see this plant as something that's like very holistic, and something that has a lot of potential to bring people together. So that's really like, I guess, the opportunity that we see that we're solving for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. So people can see themselves reflected in what it is that you're putting out there, and they find an accessible entry point into cannabis. That's what I'm taking away from that. What about you, Allie?
So, first I want to say, Wyatt, I love how like true you are to your authenticity with your brand. It really is incredible to see. And when it comes to like, like brand awareness and everything like that, I think education is very important. And the way that I want to break down the walls in cannabis and just kind of like end the stigma, while also, just like watching that stigma just go extinct, because it is based through greed and racism. And I am a huge history lover, so I'm all about like studying like history. And the reason why cannabis is even criminalized in the first place is because of a law in 1937, the Marijuana Tariff Act, that was actually targeting Mexicans. And Harry Anslinger, who was the Federal Bureau of Narcotics, who was like the president at the time, wanted something to blame after alcohol was lifted. the prohibition was lifted back in, I believe it was 1933 or 1937. It was like right around that time. So don't quote me on the exact time. I hate that there's still 3,000 people locked up in jail right now as we speak on this podcast for cannabis, while we're also like, making like a stand, while we're also like, making the difference. And that's why it's important to sit here now and to talk about this, because the reason why cannabis was criminalized was because of William Randolph Hearst, and he was the man that owns like the timber and the tree cutting for the papers and stuff. And, hemp was one of the biggest competitors at the time, because canvases, like, art, like our best masterpieces are made from hemp. Like they painted on hemp. Everything was made out of hemp. It's one of the biggest competitors, and William Randolph Hearst could not handle that at the time. Neither could Lamont DuPont, who just signed a patent for nylon, which is like the plastic waste that we pay for to this day in our clothing, in our food, and like, everything. It's not good for us. We are paying for it physically. And, then there's so many other ways that Big Pharma profits off of us, but meanwhile, there's cannabis that actually heals, and hemp that could be the answer to all of our problems. And the U.S. can literally dominate the global system with cannabis, with hemp, making hemp legalized, making it easier for hemp licenses to be given out to farmers, because that's almost just as difficult as THC. So that's the thing. I think Pinks and cannabis, and I think Flamers and House of Cannabis and everything that we're doing now, our little steps that we're baby steps now, are going to make waves in the future. It really is. We may be a little pebble in the pond, but it's making ripples, and we're doing this. And I'm so proud to be here right now. It's an honor.
Yes, that's well said. Step by step, we'll get there. Yeah.
And I'll add that the 5th episode of this season of this show is just all about the history and the cultural context of cannabis prohibition. So that's why I was ready with that answer. Yep. So go back and listen. All right. So now, despite all of that, New York's cannabis market has unique regulations and cultural dynamics. How have you adapted your marketing strategy specifically for this New York environment? And I'll begin with Wyatt.
So, okay, I think a lot of people love to hate on the New York cannabis market, especially like the first year of operations. And I want to set the record straight that Flamer would not exist without the regulatory framework that was created by the MRTA. And, the creation of a 2-tier system where you have retailers on one side and you have cultivators, processors, and distributors and brands on the other, has allowed Flamer to exist. Like in all these other states, you have monopolies from vertically integrated companies. And, we'll see what happens with New York. Obviously, we have our own challenges with, some ROs and whatnot. But it is this, I think, very unique market that New York was very intentional about creating space for smaller brands to be able to exist and to be able to create themselves in this market. And Flamer is a direct product of that. We started without any money. We started with an idea and a prayer, basically, and we were able to create something that people bought into, and we were able to find distribution for it through these larger dispensaries, and we didn't have to worry about competing with their own product on the shelves. And I think that's something that, for so many different things that you can say about this regulatory framework and the market in New York, it is very, very, very admirable. And the initial focus in the first year on, small family farms and providing them a pathway to be players in this space is something that is incredibly admirable. The focus on making sure that retail licenses went to disproportionately affected communities by the war on drugs is extremely admirable. And you see it in the data. New York is the most diverse, is the most equitable market in the country. And we're not there yet. We still have a ways to go. But whether we want to admit it or not, that's under threat. Right? Like that is absolutely under threat right now. There is more and more powerful interests that are seeing the potential of the New York market. You have these brands like Stizzy. You have these brands like To the Moon. You have these brands that are inverting our market, right? By piping in their already existing legacy unlicensed chain, like supply chains into the New York market, and they're undercutting the farmers from actually being able to survive. Like those farmers that were intended to be helped by this, they were actually now, a lot of them, getting out of this business because they can't compete with these growers from Oklahoma, with these growers from California. And so it's really, it remains to be seen what is going to happen here, right? Like, it remains to be seen whether or not we can coalesce together as communities to ensure that we have a more equitable market, to ensure that there is still space for people from every background to like succeed in this market. But I'm still so encouraged by just like where we are today and like the potential that we have in the future. And I think that when we look at the regulatory landscape in New York, the bones are there. Now they need to be enforced, and they need to be, we need to uphold our word to folks that we promised pathways into this industry. But I do think that the intention behind what New York created was very admirable and very correct. And I am concerned by some of the movements that are happening. I'm concerned by some of the coalitions that are being built that are based off of folks that are coming from out of state that have a ton of money, that are just like, buying up these like big ROs and then, hoping to vertically integrate, hoping to monopolize this market. But there is limits to that potential. And it's because of the laws that we wrote. Those people are suing, to remove those laws. Those people are doing everything they can to get out from under it so they can continue to monopolize. But what we need to do as a market is we need to hold true. We need to hold true to the promises that we put out there. We need to be intentional about what we're creating. Cannabis in New York is a billions and billions of dollar business, right? The sky is really the limit in terms of what we can create here. And we can be a model for the rest of the world, of what cannabis legalization can look like. And I think we should be very proud of what we built so far. And I think that we have so much more that we could be building to make this even more equitable and to make it more inclusive for what we want cannabis to be. And so I'm encouraged by the way that we started, and I'm hoping that we continue that spirit going forward.
All right, terrific. Ali, how have you adapted your marketing strategy to fit the New York environment?
So what we do for marketing, and I will say Wyatt is correct. We do have the right bones, but we really do and I did meet Kathy Hochul, I think like 2 years ago or a year ago, and I shook her hand. I met her for about 15 minutes, and she does believe in the cannabis world, and at the time her main focus was getting those illegal operators off the streets and having dispensary operators really kind of controlling the cannabis market. And I thought that was really admirable at the time. And, we, as for Pinks, we were very lucky because as a female owned brand, they were offering like grants and, just opportunities for us to be able to be at the forefront. And it was really like, we just got there at the right time, and it was such a blessing. And the way I like to market Pinks, because there was a point where you couldn't align with celebrities because it was like a competitive clause. It was around the beginning stages of cannabis. So instead of doing celebrity influencers, what I did was I kind of marketed ourselves like with nostalgic feels, like, recreated photos. Like I modeled myself as like Audrey Hepburn as Breakfast at Tiffany's, or Gilda, Rita Hayworth with Gilda. Like, I always like to recreate like images and marketing like that. And that was a really cool way to kind of speak to everybody, because it was like a really cool way to be like, this is Canna Couture, this is luxury. Like it's classy, it's stylish. And, I do think that the cannabis market, going back to the history a little bit, what's interesting is when alcohol was lifted from the prohibition, the marketing world was like, the whole world was just pushing for alcohol, like, because there was already billions of dollars invested in alcohol right before. And, recently I asked like ChatGPT, I was like, what's the difference between, why is cannabis like, when I go on social media, I have videos that are flagged. I mean, there was a time where I was limited to even posting on my stories, and I was limited to what I can post because I posted a video of me smoking, but girls could be taking shots like back to back, and that's all good. That goes viral, baby. So it made no sense to me why I was getting reported. And, technology and social media is not there yet. They cannot differentiate licensed operators versus illegal operators. So they're just shutting down people that are working hard, like all of us here right now. And they flag a lot of our posts. They make it impossible for our posts to kind of blow up. So our way of kind of going around that is, I'm trying to figure out a way myself, because I know that I think bigger companies are waiting for cannabis to, to kind of sweep in and buy us all out. But I think as long as we stick strong with what our brand is and our authenticity and our reason and our purpose, and, we have a strong fan base, it's all of us, because we're original, we're unique, and we were the first to do it, and we're ahead of our time. So I feel like brands like ours are going to stand out and really survive when the world kind of tries to buy everybody out. And I think that's important, is just kind of your authenticity, staying true to yourself, and, thinking outside the box. I mean, you're always going to be challenged as a cannabis operator. They don't make it easy for you, but that's why we're here.
Mm-hmm. We'll go to Velvet with the next question.
It's great hearing you talk about, well, first of all, the New York market. I admire what New York and other states have done as far as ensuring that people that have been disproportionately targeted by prohibition are getting the chance to operate in the legal market. We don't have that in Canada happening so much. So it's great to see that you have those opportunities there, and particularly in New York. Even though it's been a rough start, it's going to settle itself out, and you do have the opportunity to look at what other jurisdictions have done and learn from that. You're talking about being intentional, about authenticity, and I can just feel and see the passion that you're bringing to what it is that you do. And you've brought that into all of your very distinctive visual and design elements so that you can stand out in the marketplace. Your brand identity, though, carries more into the background as well. So let's take a little peek behind the scenes with what it is that you're doing with your company. I'm really curious to know how you're bringing your brand identity into the way that you're leading your company behind the scenes. Christina, will you share a bit about that?
Yeah, first of all, I agree with what was said about the New York cannabis scene. I think, it had its struggles, but I do believe that the MRTA is a good bill. And, we're building the plane as we fly it, as Chris Alexander used to say. Brand identity for me on a personal level is super important, because as a Latina founder in the space, I feel a huge responsibility and opportunity to open doors. And so, representation in cannabis still has a long way to go. But being based in New York City, we get to tap into such a rich mix of cultures and stories that shape how we show up as a brand. I grew up in a very strict Puerto Rican household, and I didn't start consuming cannabis until I was 27 years old. And when I went to go do that, I was like, oh, I'm going to have a pretty bong and a pretty one hitter. And I went down to St. Mark's and I ordered stuff online. And this is during the green rush. So this was early on in the cannabis scene. And I couldn't find anything that really fit who I was as a person and in my lifestyle, things that I wanted to leave out that abuela wouldn't freak out about. And when I couldn't find those things, I thought, all right, well, here's something that's missing in the market. I had just sold my art magazine, so I just called up all the artists, a glass blower, ceramicist, an artist that I could license artwork and put it on rolling papers and give back to them and their community. So House of Puff is really who I am. It's my DNA. I've poured my heart and soul to it, and it is a deep reflection of my own identity.
And how is that expressed in your day-to-day operations, for example? How do you express that in the way that you work with your business partners, or if you have staff, how you work with your staff?
Yeah, I
think
think
come out?
It's important to be inclusive. I work with an all-female team from all sorts of backgrounds, and it only leads to more creativity and more productivity. I like to hire people who things that I'm weak at, like Excel, financials. No, can't do it, won't do it. I have a great co-founder and CFO who's amazing. So I like to bring in talent and people that see things differently. And I think that's why our brand has been so successful, and especially working with artists. We like to work with the LGBTQA community, the Black and Brown community. And I think it just, I can't see any other way building a brand. It's our voice. It's who we are. And, that's how we conduct ourselves in business. And, the cannabis market and companies are, hate to say it, a lot of them just white bros, chilling in their mom's basement, or these big MSOs that think they're creating these like lifetime achievement brands. And it's not. It's like what Wyatt said. It's the smaller brands. It's the ones that we're moving the needle, and we will move the needle. We will be the success of this market because we're creative, we're sharp, and we're New Yorkers. And we know how to get shit done.
I'm going to reiterate what you said about how you recognize areas that you don't have strengths in and how important it is to bring in other people. I think that's important for listeners to key in on. And that relates to what you said, how there's many cannabis companies that are focused inwardly on themselves, and they're kind of the classic description that you gave there, and just being aware of what your own strengths are so that you can bring in people to complement what it is that you do and build a stronger company. So kudos to that. And I know you're all doing that as well.
All right. And I'll go to Allie. What's been your biggest marketing challenge or even misstep so far? And what have you learned from it?
So actually, going back to what I said earlier, it's like, just social media not being up to date with legal licensed operators. And, it's a world that it's a battle we're still fighting, and it's every day. Actually, I liked when Christina Lopez quoted when she said, like, we're building the plane as we're flying it. Like, it's exactly that on social media, because we're not really, like, social media is not really open to cannabis yet. They aren't really helping us. I mean, one thing is when I first started Pinks, like really like when I was underground, and I posted something on my story, like, on my Snapchat got deleted, and it was like, 9 years of memories gone forever. I mean, I lost videos with my first boyfriend had passed, so I lost all of our pictures and everything. And, I was so hurt and angry that I had to lose every single memory because the social media is just not up to date with cannabis. And, cannabis is not a hard drug. It is not something that should have ever been. It's a victim to the war on drugs. And there's an actual war that should be aware of. I think fentanyl is a huge crisis in America that should be talked about more, and not cannabis. And I think that's the thing for me, is just social media. And that's the only challenge I face with marketing. I mean, I have no problem going up to people and meeting people in person, and you could be from any part of the world, and everybody that works with Pinks, I have people in China, in India, in the Philippines, in Canada. I have people all over the world, and when they see Pinks, they're like, I love this. This is so cute. I love this so much. Oh my gosh, I love working for this brand. I love Pink. I love cannabis. I can't wait for this to be legalized. So, we have a world of people that are just ready for this change, and social media needs to catch up, baby. They need to meet us where we are now in 2025.
All right, Wyatt, what's been your biggest challenge or misstep, and what have you learned from that?
Okay, so I have maybe a bit of a different perspective. So I'm actually very grateful that it is very challenging to market cannabis. And that means it's like, if it's hard for us, it's hard for everyone. And so, like, let's say, for instance, these social media platforms were to open up tomorrow to cannabis ad spend, what we would see is like a flood of capital from the biggest cannabis companies dominating those platforms. And, I have a lot of beef with the social media platforms about the ways that they are inconsistent in their policies, the ways that they don't have clear policies, which is crazy to me. It's like you clearly are training your algorithm on something. Just tell us what it is so that we can follow your rules. And they're like, no, we actually don't really want to tell you the rules. And it's like, okay, that's insane. But I do actually think that it is an opportunity for smaller brands when it isn't. You can't just dump a bunch of ad spend into cannabis and expect yourself to grow because those channels aren't there. Like you aren't really allowed to spend on digital media in the same way. There's some channels, but like, I don't know, they're not like the most efficient, right? It's not what the broader CPG marketing world has access to. And whether that's like social or what have you. And so I think right now, I see that as actually an opportunity because what it forces you to do is it actually forces you to go outside and to meet people and to spread your brand through word of mouth marketing. And so that's our strategy. We do a ton of events. We do a ton of in-person types of marketing. And that way we can start to organically spread out the brand through that word of mouth. And I think that's the strongest way to create brand loyalty. And I think that's also the strongest way that you can build something that has meaning and has like an impact, is through that kind of person to person type of marketing. And to me, that's the most effective marketing in cannabis right now because it's, the only channel that we're really truly allowed to operate in without as much restriction. And so, yeah, I see it as like an opportunity, and I am actually like glad that there's some of that restriction on the marketing side of things because I feel like it forces us to be more creative, and marginalized people are usually the most creative. So, like, bring it on. And then I'll say one more thing is I do think that right now in New York, one of the challenges, is there is brands that are operating that are not abiding by the regulations. And there are dispensaries that are operating that are not abiding by the regulations. And that just creates an uneven playing field. Like if we wanted to cheat, like you can cheat right now in this market. You can ignore the law in a lot of ways because there's not uniform enforcement that is happening in the New York market. Brands aren't supposed to be paying dispensaries for shelf space. They are. Brands aren't supposed to be paying dispensaries like thousands of dollars in sponsorship fees. They are. And so it's like that creates this imbalance of access because, for a brand that doesn't have millions of dollars from unlicensed cannabis sales, like you don't have the same capital to like spend on your marketing, And so, with New York not enforcing some of those regulations, it means that we're facing this uneven playing field. And you know what? I'm still of the mindset of like, well, you can't do it like us. You don't know this market as well as you are, as we do. You weren't outside as much as we are. You weren't working with these like brand ambassadors that are so embedded in these communities. So I'm like, still like, I know that we have this like great potential, but it is unfortunate because there are laws, there are regulations, and like we aren't supposed to be doing discounts right now. We aren't supposed to be having loyalty programs, like all these things, and yet they exist, and they are, there's no uniform enforcement, and there's some selective actions, but basically what a lot of people have realized is it's easier to just do it and see what they say, what they slap you on the wrist for, and expect that it's only just a minor slap on the wrist. And so you'll pay the fee and then you'll keep going. And that kind of mentality just, it breeds a lot of unevenness in a marketing, in a marketing landscape. And I think what I would like is for the regulations to be clearly laid out across the board and for people to follow those regulations and for the regulators to enforce those regulations. And I think that actually will create a much healthier marketing dynamic in this market.
All right. Thank you. Christina.
I mean, Wyatt for president.
Or at least executive director of OCM at a minimum.
Everything just so well said, spot on. Especially when it comes to marketing, right? I, walked into a dispensary and, we have a good relationship with, and saw a brand that I knew was, I don't know what there's a cap on how much you can give to dispensaries in terms of whether it's hats or things for the bud tenders or tip boxes. And I walk in and I see way thousands and thousands of dollars, and it's in totality. And I'm seeing in this dispensary has 3 or 4 dispensaries, and we, House of Puff, we're small but mighty, but we're still small. We're not backed by a VC, and spending millions of dollars on all of this swag. So 100% agree with Wyatt. And on the same note, if you're going to put us into this box, we're going to jump out of the box and get creative and ask for forgiveness rather than permission. And one of the things, that we've really focused on to sort of mitigate all of the, where we can't participate, whether it's because of money, whether it's because of access, relationships, what have you, is we got really nerdy with SEO and YouTube. Not a lot of cannabis brands are on YouTube. Don't know why. And listen, YouTube will age gate the crap out of some of our stuff, but we have had so much ROI on our YouTube channel. It's just one of those sweet spots for us. And then in terms of, our SEO, how are people going to find us? Like when somebody types in something like New York cannabis, Latina owned, we want to be the first ones at the top of the list, right? But we can't pay for ads because Google won't allow us. And so we had to get really creative. We took a 6-month course. Neil Patel, he's the SEO guru. I suggest everybody look him up if you're in cannabis. And we just taught ourselves how we want to rank and show up on the search engine results page, because nobody's going to page Google 2. They're just not. They're staying on Google, the first page, and 90% of people never leave the first. So we're just like, all right, like we got to get creative. If we can't take out ads, if we're getting shadow banned on TikTok, on Instagram, on any Meta-owned thing, we still want our consumers and our customers and our future customers to have access to us and find us with ease. And so that's just one of the things that's really worked for us.
All right, terrific. Thank you. Velvet.
Yeah, along the lines, just to continue a little bit about the social media conversation, it is challenging no matter where you are. And ultimately, social media is a rented platform. So you don't own that connection that you have with people there. And, only 5 or 10% of your followers are going to see your social media posts anyways. Something that you're all doing well that I know, because I've signed up for all of your newsletters, and you're all showing up in my office, in my home, in my inbox. And that's a really powerful connection that I suggest every cannabis company do what they can to build a stronger connection with their consumers that way. You show up where your people are. They want you to show up in their inbox, and you can really have a personal one-on-one conversation in your newsletter that you don't get to have through social media. So congratulations to all of you for really jumping on that. Every cannabis company should be focused on building their email newsletter list, because social media, you don't own that space. And no matter how much we hope or get frustrated with how social media treats cannabis, they can do what they want and change their minds every day if they want to. So it's a exercise in frustration to rely on social media. So good work on keeping your newsletters strong. Let's move into talking about the economy. We're all experiencing economic challenges, and that's going to continue over the next few years, I'm sure. The macroeconomics are impacting everybody in Canada, in the States, no matter where you are. So I'm wondering, what are you choosing to double down on in your company to protect your company as we navigate this changing economy, so that you can work on continuing to be profitable and having those strong consumer relationships? Allie, let's start with you.
Actually, I'm so happy that you asked this question, because because of the economy and also just so we actually kind of got lucky and we did this fashion show in February, and we had sold out of our collection, which was like it was like 30 stores that we needed to get into in order for us to sell out. And we did that. We accomplished our goal, but we had gotten a larger order, and people were saying like they wanted like more on the collection, like more stuff that they could sell because we do have a Canna Couture line. We do have like, the 5 full gram pre-rolls, the 2 full gram pre-roll rose petal. And, rose petals are a little bit pricier than just like a paper. So we are a little bit pricier. And that is something that, I've talked to retailers because I like to get like, feedback always and just see how we can make it better. And they said that, if we could like, have like, dimes or like, smaller, like sampler sizes for people. So that's what we did. We widened our collection and now we are selling dimes, single pre-rolls, infused too. We're selling a shake infused with THC, because like that's another thing. You could get creative and just add a little keef in there, and that way the consumer gets more high, and we could sell like a shakier kind of flower. And, we could do stuff like that and just, think outside the box, like always be a little creative, think outside the pink box, and that's what we had to do. And I called it chapter 2 of our collection, and each collection is going to be a new chapter, a new season, a new fun little era for pinks to enter. So I just say you always have to get creative. Think of a way that you can do, like I have a new name for everything too. Like the dimes are Pink's diamonds, the 8s are Pink's envies. Like, like it has a luxury name to it. Like, just think outside the box.
How about you, Wyatt?
Well, I'd like to say that these tariffs are the stupidest thing I've ever heard. And it is ridiculous that we are even putting up with this. Like, what is going on? Why are we trying to put up barriers between trade? Like, isn't this America? Don't we want to see businesses growing, businesses like thriving? And it's hurting everyone, from our farmers, like with their fertilizer cost or materials that go into like growing the plant, to us on like packaging. It's really silly, and I think we should recognize that. Like, it's unfortunate that we're having to exist in a time where we are not able to grow our businesses and not have to worry about some dictator like at the top like making some silly decisions. So yeah, but at the same time, I think we are really lucky that we're working in the New York market, because the New York market is an engine for growth right now. We are opening new stores every week. We are expanding our, monthly sales every month. We're growing, and we're going to continue to grow. And there is a ton of space to continue to grow in New York. And so, it is really fortunate that we got in early, and we've been able to scale up with this market. And that's really our strategy. It's like to bet on this market and to really double down here and to learn all the ins and outs of this business, like through the licensed New York market, and then see where we can take it from there. But, in order to do that, you really have to focus on New York and on the legal market. And there's definitely things that we're doing to diversify over time, whether it's like accessory stuff or whether it's like even events and some of our kind of creative marketing, let's say, opportunities that we have to work with like other folks. But yeah, I feel like there's, it is really about building the business like as the market scales up, and and understanding where you have opportunities to like lower some costs to maybe offset like some other costs that will increase, and where you might have to find new sources for certain things, depending on how things are changing. And I think it's a very challenging, business environment overall with the amount of uncertainty that's happening, like in the broader economy. But also at the same time, it's like cannabis is one of those products that are that people do use, on a regular basis, and that is an essential, per the government's like own guidelines, right? Products. So it's great to be in this market. I'll say that. Like, and it's great to be in a market that's growing, and that is just a overall macro environment that like you don't really have control over. And so I am very grateful that we are in this current market where we are.
Christina, do you have anything to add about how you're doubling down to protect your company through challenging economic times?
Yeah, I mean, so one of the things that we started to realize, in this crazy economy in the last, few years is, I think this economy, as crappy as it's been, I think it's making people really rethink their habits, especially when it comes to drinking alcohol. And I think that the data shows that more and more people are drinking less alcohol, and consuming more cannabis. So we really listen to our consumers and the data, and which is why our first New York product was the spritz. It was a sublingual spray that, was, again, microdose. It was, between 3 and 5 milligrams. You could spray it into your mouth. You could spray it into your drink. If you wanted to crossfade, and some people like to mix it with their Tito's, that's fine too. But a lot of them were using as an alternative. So because of the success of the spritz and because of what's going on at the federal level and all of that, the loophole with the Farm Bill is something that we took advantage of. And so we took the spritz, out of the New York market, and now we sell it Delta 9, so direct to consumer, which is something that we were a little nervous about, of course, because we've never, sold a regulated product via our website before. And it really paid off. There are a lot of people who don't have access to an adult recreational market, in some states. And so, people can subscribe to our spritz, get it delivered to their door. So that was a little bit of a pivot that really worked out well for us. And then the other thing is we're doubling down on education, just like we always have. And I think in a shaky economy, people stick with what they trust and like to learn. And I think that's why brand storytelling, which all of the brands here on the call, we're all really good at. And I think education is so important because if someone understands your product, it feels represented, they see the value, they'll come back even when money's tight.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those are all some great tactics that everybody's sharing that people can consider. I'm also going to share a free resource that I have, and I'll email a link to all of you, but just mention in here for the listeners, I have a free profit recovery tool that I put together. Many companies are leaking profits in ways that you don't necessarily think are the ways that you're going to be losing money in your company. And so this is a quick 5-minute tool that you can go through to assess where you're most likely to be leaking profits that you're not aware of. Mm-hmm. If you'd like to check it out, you can go to www.phenologic.ca/joint, special for this podcast. And I'll just quickly spell the name. It's PHENOLOGIC.ca/joint. And again, it's just a quick tool that you can go through to assess the most likely areas that you're going to be losing money, so you can tighten up on those back end areas of your company to make sure that you can get through whatever economic difficulties we're going to experience and come out the other side with some more money in the bank.
Now, looking ahead, what emerging marketing trends or opportunities do you see, both for your businesses and for the market overall in New York? Now, I'll start with Ali.
I see, New York is I love New York and our legalization. One thing that's actually really cool is that we based our laws through, similar to tobacco rather than the West Coast that based it similar to alcohol. So there's a lot of restrictions on where you can consume alcohol, whereas tobacco, you can consume it literally on the streets right in front of a police officer. And I mean, it's just so just, it makes you feel so alive to smoke a pink joint right in front of an officer and be like, you can't do anything to me anymore. It's just so, and the one thing that's so cool about the East Coast is it's so new to us. This is we're so fresh. West Coast, they've been doing it for over a decade now. So they like coming over to the East Coast and seeing our fresh new ideas. And, I will hint to you guys now, we are planning a Pink's Burlesque Bud Tender show. So please reach out to me and let me know. I would love to have both of your brands as sponsors too, if you guys want to discuss that later, because I love your brands. I love what you guys stand for, and I love collaborations. But, that's my way of, kind of continuing with like the New York market, is just like coming up with really cool, like we did the New York Week fashion show where we had like our collection come out and like a fashion-esque, and we're now planning a bud tenders burlesque show where we'll be able to give the bud tenders like a real taste of Pinks while also putting on a beautiful burlesque show, which I've never been to. And everybody that I've told this about is like, oh, I want to go to a burlesque show so badly. I've never been to one. It's not the 1930s anymore. We can't walk down the street and find the nearest burlesque show. So that's why I like to create things that, you don't always get to see. You don't always have like a taste of, and that's what we like to do with Pinks, is like we like to sell the experience. Like it's not just a pink box, not just a pack of pre-rolls, but no, it's an experience. You get to have the whole girly pop vibe, and let's go do it at a burlesque show. Let's sit there, let's puff some Pinks, let's watch some beautiful performances, and let's just have a good time, because that's what we like to have fun here. Like it's not that serious. Like it's cannabis, like that's what I like to say to people. It's not that serious. It's not that deep. It didn't need to be criminalized in the first place. So let's all just have a girly pop vibe.
Oh, terrific. Thank you. Christina, marketing trends or opportunities in the coming couple of years?
I don't know if anybody will agree with me on this, but I always say this as sort of the future. I think low dose and lifestyle will lead the new wave. I think we're moving past how high can I get and into how do I want to feel, because I think people more and more integrating cannabis into their routines like they would, skincare or supplements. And I remember when New York went rec, I was like, one day we're going to be walking down the streets of New York and everybody's going to just be microdosed, every single person. So I'm very bullish on the microdose market. And I also think we're going to see a collapse of a lot of generic weed brands that don't say anything new or do anything different. I think the brands that will last, especially in New York, are going to be the ones that tap into culture, fashion, art, wellness, music, and build something that feels like a lifestyle and not like a skew.
All right. So like a steady state of low dose.
Yeah, steady microdose.
Yeah, sounds great. Wyatt?
I think there's a lot of various marketing trends that like we're watching and interested in. I do think the the loophole in the Farm Bill and like the Delta 9 THC stuff, it is something that is going to become more and more of a thing, overall. And I feel like it's something that is we'll see what the dynamics look like for legal cannabis, 5 years down the line with those potential markets intersecting and then diverging, so this is definitely something that I'm like paying attention to, because it's to me unclear like where exactly that's going to go. And then for New York specifically, I think we have a huge opportunity in New York right now. So New York is currently working on regulations for event licenses, like event permits. And right now there is just like, in cannabis at a national level, there is actually not a very sophisticated regulatory framework for events at all. Mm-hmm. New York has this opportunity to create something special, to create something unique, to create something that fits so perfectly within our culture, right? Like we live in New York City, we have small apartments, we go outside, we go to bars, we go to clubs, we go to parks, we go to, wherever. And that's usually where we experience cannabis, right? Is like outside. And so I think that New York with these event licenses, they're currently writing the regulations. And if there's any regulators on this podcast listening today, let's make this something that is like unique to our market, to actually let's set the example nationally and let's create something that's safe, that's effective, but that allows us to actually go out into the community and to do what we're already doing, but do it in a way that actually, partners with these dispensaries, partners like with these like community programs, and allows us to like sell, through these licenses in more places. I think it's a huge opportunity for New York, and I think it's something that I'm watching very closely, and I'm very excited about the potential for the CGS, the Cannabis Grower Showcases program that we had the first year of the market. It was something that was so incredibly unique and so incredibly special and had such amazing impact, and we weren't able to continue it because like not everyone necessarily played by all the rules or whatever. And then also like it was intended to be a stopgap measure for as new dispensaries opened, and as we were opening new dispensaries, it became less of a necessary distribution channel. But those markets like really honestly created these connections. Like all of our network of cannabis, like from our manufacturer to our farmers, like we met all of those folks through those Cannabis Grower Showcases. Like the deep connections with a lot of these brands like came out of those direct community engagements, like through those events, through those showcases. And I think it's just this opportunity for New York to actually step up and really lead and create something new. And I'm so excited about the possibility of it. And I think that it's something that could really transform our market into something that everyone starts to pay even more attention to.
No, I would agree. And especially at a time when people outside the U.S. are reconsidering whether they want to visit the U.S. And especially New York, with the loss of tourists, this is a great opportunity to make sure that whether they go to any other part of the country, that they still want to come to New York.
Exactly. And it's like, why at these big music festivals can you buy so much alcohol? It's like, if we can sell alcohol somewhere, we can sell cannabis somewhere. So let's make it happen.
Our last question, and thank you very much, all of you. Our last question, Velvet.
I wanted to find out what you're most excited about for your company this year, and I think that you've answered it. And so I'm interested to tweak that a little bit, and I want to find out, how do you want to feel about cannabis and what you're doing and what your role in your company is? How do you want to feel at the end of 2025, Christina?
Great question. I guess purposeful. I want our customers and future customers to believe in us, know what we stand for, know that the product that they're getting, and why we exist, even beyond our product, as a brand, as a pillar in the community, as an education support system for them, because I think House of Puff is, our future is clear. And I think that we really have built this brand on our values, and we've built a great community around them. And so I want to look back and say, we were purposeful, and we did it with purpose.
How about you, Wyatt?
I feel so incredibly grateful to even be where we are now, and like the team that's surrounding us, and even, like the space, like this like actual physical office that we're in, like serving as like a community gathering point. Like from the events that we do, for people like finding friends and finding connection through that. Like I want to continue that feeling, and I want to do it at larger and larger levels. That's where I want to be at the end of this year. I think we've already created so many resources for our community that we've started to tap into and to build out, like whether it's like our office space being used by Gender Liberation Movement, which is this great direct action group for trans rights around the country, or it's like us giving back to the Transmissions Music Festival, which was the first trans-led music festival in New York, or whether it's like us employing more and more queer trans creatives and working with more freelance creatives. I feel like that's, the purpose of creating Flamer was to make sure that there wasn't just like a rainbow slapped onto something and it to be those resources extracted out of our community. Queer people have really led a lot of the legalization medical movement, out of the AIDS crisis, and queer people smoke a disproportionate amount of cannabis for a variety of reasons. And And I think that for us, when we started Flamer, what we didn't want to happen was for these bigger corporations to say that they supported queer people and to put that pride flag on something, and then to extract that market out of the community and to pocket that into what they were doing. And instead, what we set out to build was this company that was rooted in our community, that could serve as a platform for more and more economic activity and as an economic engine that we could use for greater and greater good. And I feel like we're doing it already, and I feel like we could be doing so much more as we continue to grow. And so at the end of this year, I want to feel like that growth.
Nice. And last word to you, Ellie. How do you want to feel about your company, Pinks, at the end of 2025?
I want to feel like we're taking that power back, because, cannabis was we're taking that power of cannabis and we're returning it to where, it's a luxury, it's a self-care, and it's for everybody. It really is. Cannabis, I feel like, listen, I don't judge anybody's vices, but personally, when I drink alcohol, it brings the worst out in me. I don't, I act differently. I will literally throw up in public, if I drink too much. And I know I'm not the only person that has done that. And, I have stories of people that have literally urinated in public, and they never would do that if they were smoking weed. Cannabis doesn't make you act out of character. It doesn't make you act any type of way. And I think, like Christina said earlier, we're going to be entering this, not how high can I get, but let me just smoke to ease what I can. And I think it's really going to be, I'm excited for this new world that we're entering, this new era of, we aren't going to get shit-faced or just plastered. No, we're going to be sophisticated. We're going to be creative. It's going to be a new renaissance. It's going to be so cool. And I can't wait to see. Art imitates art. And Lana Del Rey says she's one of my favorite artists. And I cannot wait to see what the world is going to bring when cannabis is legalized. I can't wait to see the fashion, because fast fashion, everybody always says, oh, that's an issue. That's an issue. Well, yeah, it kind of is an issue. But the reason why it's an issue is because it's not an issue because everybody wants fast fashion. Everybody wants new clothes. We live in the era of social media where you're posting a new outfit every day. So why not make it hemp? Why not make it beautiful? Why not make it canna couture? Why not make it luxury? So I just want to see a future where the world is weed. How I am 98% weed, 2% girly pop. I think I want the world to be that too.
Well, I wanted to thank you all for today. A couple of you mentioned Chris Alexander, and when he would say, that we're building the plane as we fly it. And I used to always correct him and say, no, we're building the pieces that go into building the plane as we fly it. You three are great pieces of what we're building in New York. So I wanted to thank you for that. So Wyatt Harms from Flamer, Ali Bianco Pinks, and Christina Lopez from the House of Puff. Thank you all. And Velvet, thank you so much from British Columbia.
Thank you. This has been a great conversation. Congratulations to everybody on the great work you've done so far. And I look forward to watching you grow your companies.
That's it for this episode of Joint Session Diverse Voices in New York State Cannabis. If you found today's discussion valuable, consider leaving a rating and review on your favorite podcast platform. It helps more listeners find the show. Better yet, share it with colleagues, advocates, and anyone interested in the future of cannabis in New York. Joint Session is produced by me, Herb Barbot, together with executive producer Robert Curtis from Simlev Media. Special thanks as always to Cannabis Wire. You can follow us on Instagram at jointsession.pod and on LinkedIn at Joint Session Podcast. If you have any comments, questions, or topic suggestions, reach out to me at herb.jointsession@gmail.com. Until next time, this is Herb Barbot. Thanks for listening.